Hello and welcome back to Miss Shepherd Teaches. This is yet another video on my channel. Today we are going to be looking at some maths topics. Woohoo! I know everybody loves maths. This is a topic that I have found has been quite a struggle in a lot of classes that I've taught in, and that is actually rounding. So let's take a look. I'm going to start off with my rounding. So let's start off with some single digit numbers. Let's take the number 6, for example. Now, if I turned around and told you what 6 rounded to, that wouldn't be very helpful. So we're going to have a look at why we round it first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a little number line. So excuse my wonky lines and my counting there. So I'm going to set up a number line and I need to put 6 on my number line. First, I need to look at what tens comes before 6. Now this is a multiple of 10. 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, so on and so forth. The multiple of 10 that comes before 6 would be 0. The multiple of 10 that comes after 6 would be 10. Now it's not going to be 20 or 30 or 40 because it's the next multiple of 10 that comes after 6. What I'm then going to do is I am going to fill out my number line. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to give my 5 a line all the way through because that's halfway. 6, 7, 8, and 9. I'm going to look at where 6 is on my number line now. So I look down and I'm going to circle it. My 6 is there. So what happens is I'm going to change my colour quickly. Let's go for red, like my hair. And I'm going to see how many jumps it takes to get to 0 or how many jumps it takes to get to 10. Let's start off by going down to 0. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I take 6 jumps to the left. Let's see how many jumps it takes to get to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. I take 4 jumps to get to 10. So what I'm going to do with 6 is I'm going to round it up because it is closer to 10 than it is to 0. So let's change that back to that. And I'm going to write 10 next to it. Let's do it with a 2-digit number now. So let's go for 13. I'm going to do exactly the same. I'm going to have my number line. I know my number line 10 long now because I've done the one above it. Makes it a little bit easier. So I look for my 10 before 13 and my 10 after 13. The 10 before 13 is going to be 10. If you're not too sure, you could just make sure you look at what the tens column is. It's a 1, so it's going to be 10. After that, we're going to have 20. Rather than spend all of that time writing those numbers out, what I'm going to do is I am going to just go to the middle, put my middle number in there, 15. So I've got 10, 15 and 20. I now need to figure out where my 13 will go. So I can count upwards from 10. So 10, 11, 12, 13. Now I can already see 13 is closer to 10 than it is to 20. I've got a much bigger arrow going all the way up to 20. 13 is closer to 10 than 20, so my answer for that one would be 10 as well. Now, we could spend all our time doing this, doing number lines, finding out all of these things, but there's a much, much easier way of figuring it out and working out what it is. And it's always helpful to remember this. If you have got 1, 3 for some reason. I was thinking of the number 3 in my mind, that's why. I was skipping ahead of myself. 1, 2, 3 or 4. If you've got a 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9. So those are the numbers that you're going to look at. These 4, you round down. And these 5, you round up. Now 5 is one of those funny numbers. It's exactly in the middle of the 2 lots of 10s. So we say that one rounds up as well because 0 will stay as the number that it is. Now, people have come up with different rhymes to remember this. Some people have made their own songs to do with it. There's loads of wonderful stuff up on YouTube that you can find to help you remember this if you're not sure. I can't off the top of my head remember any of them, which is brilliant. But I can always post something in the description down below that's, well, I will. I'll post down in the description down below a little rhyme that you can use to remember. But what we do need to know is that 5 is the magic number. 5 is the magic number. Anything above it, we go up. Anything below it, we go down. Now that was rounding to the nearest 10. Which means we're looking at our 10s and we're rounding to 10s. Let's take a look at rounding to the nearest 10 when we're in the hundreds, and then we're going to look at rounding to the nearest 100 because they work differently. So if I had 135 as my number, first thing that I'm going to do is if I'm rounding to the 10, I'm going to underline my 10s column because I know that's the one that I need to round to. I look next door at my 5. Now I need to figure out, am I going up, am I going down? 5 is my magic number, so I know I go up with my 5. Now what that needs to do is you go up to the next 10. So it'll be 1, and instead of a 3, it'll be 4. And then we pop in our placeholder, 0, because 40, we know, is a multiple of 10. If I counted up in 10s, eventually I would reach the number 140. If I had it the other way, let's try 262. I underline the 10s because I'm rounding to my nearest 10. I look next door. I look at my 2. 5 is our magic number. It is less than 5, so I round down. Now this is where some people get confused. Some people round down and they would put 250. That is not the right answer because there's not the 10 below it. You end up making 12 steps to get to 262. You would, if you're rounding down, you keep that number the same, you keep that 10's number the same, and you just put a 0 on there, so it would be 260. So, now that we've covered that, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get my rubber, rub those out, and we are going to get on to rounding to the nearest hundreds. Let's say we have the number 365. Why not? That's a good maths number. 365. If I'm rounding to the nearest 100, I look at my hundreds column. I'm going to underline my hundreds column. I look next door. It's a 6. Now, what I need to do is I need to figure out, am I rounding up? Am I rounding down? 5 is our magic number. 6 is more, so we round up. What I'm going to do is my 3 stays the same. My 3 doesn't stay the same. I've just made a mistake. I was rounding to the nearest 10 then. My 3 doesn't stay the same. I round up, so I know that number needs to go up. So rather than 3, it's going to go to 4. Now, because we're rounding to the nearest 100, it needs to be a multiple of 100. So it's going to have our 2 placeholders in there, and it's going to be 400. If I looked at it on a number line, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I can't talk and think at the same time. I would have 300 this side, 400 that side. Imagine these go in tens. So 310, 320. Here we'd have 350. I know 365 would be there, and that's closer to 400 than it is to 300. Let's give another one a go. Let's say we had 631. Rounding it to the nearest 100, I'm going to underline my hundreds because that's the one I need to figure out if it goes up or down, or stays the same if I'm rounding down. Look next door, it's a 3. Do I need to round up or down? 5 is the magic number. It's less than 5, so I need to round down. That means the 100 stays the same, and we put in our 2 place value holders, so it will become 600. Let's try that with a thousands number in there as well. So let's have 3,438. I'm still rounding to the nearest 100, so I underline my hundreds number. I look next door. I figure out, am I rounding it up or rounding it down? It's 3, so I round down. My thousands stays the same because I'm not doing anything to do with that. Because it rounds down, my 4 stays the same, and I put in my place value holders there. Let's have a look at one that rounds up. Let's do 9,694. A bigger number this time. Underline my hundreds and look next door. I have a 9, so I know I'm going to be rounding upwards. I keep my 9,000. 6 rounds up to 7. I put in my place value holders there. Now there's one that I'm going to do that some people find difficult. There are some people that I know who've got this really, really quickly, and it's absolutely fantastic. This one is where I might give you the number 399, and I tell you to round it to the nearest. We're going to go for 10s here. We're rounding it to the nearest 10. This one's a tricky one. I look next door at my 9. I know I'm going to round up. So what happens is I know, let's go through it. I have my 3 there. I need to round 9 up. Oh, can't round 9 up. 9 becomes 10, but I can't write that because that becomes 3,100. If I put 10 in there, my place value holder in there, that doesn't work. I tell you what, let's give this a go. Let's, seeing as that didn't work, let's just, didn't mean to go back to the pencil then, silly me. Let's do that. That works, doesn't it? 399 rounds up to 310. Not quite, I don't think. I think I might have made a mistake there. So, let's rub it out. And the easier way for us to do this, keep my 3 the same, that becomes 10. So what I'm going to do, 1 above the 3, 0 in there. So I'm still putting my 10 in, and then I'm putting my place value holder in there. Now what I need to do, just like when we add and we carry a number across, I need to add that on there. So those two added together gives me 400. Now that might be quite easy if you know that 399 is 1 away, but this can come up in lots of contexts, lots of other questions and numbers that might be a little bit more tricky to see. So next thing that we're going to do is we are going to round to the nearest 1,000. Just rub that off. Again, it is exactly the same context. Let's go 3,281. Because I'm rounding to the nearest 1,000, I underline my 1,000. I look next door at my 2. It is a 2, so I know I round down. That means I keep that one the same and all of the rest become zeros, my place value holder. So I round down to 3,000. It's a multiple of 1,000, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, etc., etc. Let's go for 6,792. Multiplying to the nearest 1,000, underline it, look next door. It's a 7, 5's my magic number, it's above that, so I know I'm going up. 6 changes to a 7 then, and the rest become place value holders. Let's take a look at it with 10,000 numbers, but still rounding to the nearest 1,000. 32,511. Let's go for that one. I'm going to underline my 1,000. This time it's got a comma, but it still makes the same thing. I could put commas in the other ones. Technically, I just don't tend to with thousands. When it gets to 10,000s, I tend to put them in there because it distinguishes those numbers a little bit easier. Look next door. 5 is my magic number, so I know that's going to go up. My 3 stays the same. 2 changes to a 3, and then the rest become zeros. The same premise applies if you're rounding to the nearest 10,000, if you're rounding to the nearest 100,000, if you're rounding to the nearest million. It still applies throughout all of those. So 5 or more, up you soar. 4 or below, down you go. There you go, I remembered one. Those are ones that you can use for any rounding to help you. You've just got to remember everything past that number becomes a place value holder of 0. The next thing that we're going to do, and probably the last thing on this video, because I think this one's been going on for a little while now, rounding's quite a big topic, is to round decimals. Ooh, interesting. You might be asked to round decimals. So you're going to round to the nearest 10th. So I might have 0.29, and it's asking you to round to the nearest 10th. I'm just quickly going to put a place value grid up here now. So I've got my ones, I'm going to put my decimal point in there. I've got my tenths, and I've got my hundredths. Notice my tenths and my hundredths are lowercase letters. When you're doing decimals, those ones are lowercase. Everything else is uppercase on the left-hand side. I always forget my lefts and my rights. Everything on the right-hand side of the decimal point is a lowercase, so that you can see between them. Because if that was a capital, if this was a capital T, it would just look like it was tens. So you're being asked to round to the nearest 10th. So here I've got 0.29. I'm rounding to this number. So what I do is still look the same way. I look next door. If it's 5 or more, up we soar. It's definitely bigger than 5, so I need to round up. Exactly the same process. I keep my 0 point. I move that 2 up, and it becomes a 3, and then I put my place value holder in as the 0. With decimals, I don't actually need that 0 in there. I can get rid of it. Anything past the final numbers that you've done that end in 0, if you don't have any numbers after it, you can just get rid of the 0 in there. You don't need it. Let's take a look at 13.42. Let's have a look at that one. Rounding to the nearest 10th. Underline my 10th. Look next door at the 2. 5 or more, up we soar. It's not. 4 or below, down we go. It is 4 or below, so we're going down. I keep my 13. I put my point in there. My 4 rounds down, which means it stays the same. And I change the 2 to a 0 for my placeholder. Now, as I said before, I don't need that 0. I don't need it there. because anything past it just becomes not worth it. So it becomes 13.4. Same thing as if you are rounding to the nearest hundredth. Let's take 2.384. Now I've got my thousandth column in there, so that would be here, and that would be my thousandths column. I've got 2.384 in there. So if I'm rounding to the nearest hundredth, I underline my hundredth here, and I look next door. 5 or more, up we saw. It's not. 4 or below, down we go. It's a 4, so I know I'm rounding down. So that will become 2.3. 8 will stay the same. And I'm not even going to put the 0 in there because I don't need it. I already know that, so I'm going to leave it out completely. So it becomes 2.38. When it comes to decimals, you do not need to write that 0. Same goes if you're rounding thousandths, if you're rounding 10,000ths, etc., etc. The premise always stays the same. 5 or more, up you saw. 4 or below, down you go. Okay, that brings us to the end of the video. I'm sorry that my video cut out halfway through, unfortunately. My camera only records for 20 minutes, and because I was doing some setup stuff before with sound and everything, it cut that first bit off, and it decided to cut the end, and it just decided to stop without warning me. Thankfully, I still have the audio for the end of it, so you should have heard the audio even if you didn't have the video. That's it. I hope you have enjoyed the video. I hope it was useful in some way. It taught you something. Don't forget, if there's any topics that you want me to cover, you can leave that down in the comments below. I hope you've enjoyed, I guess. And I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.